Hello everybody, welcome back to my YouTube storytelling channel. This is Hua. I am here to read to you chapter 2 of Cryptomnesia. I hope that you enjoy chapter 1. Again, this is mature adult content, so please be sure to listen with headphones. Sit back, relax, and enjoy.
In the light, no complaining, we were alright. But then again, I thought we were one of a kind. Oh, na, oh, you're good with lies. Oh, na, wish I wasn't right. Now every morning when I wake up, you're late so close, I gotta push you to your side. I go to work while you still sleep, I don't wanna argue cause it's never worth the fight. Oh, na, oh, you're good with lies.
15 days until the wedding, Francesca said, as she sewed Luke's tunic. The fire was blaring in her chamber, and the night moon was out for a visit. Winter would be settling soon, and she was hurting inside her soul. The barn was getting near done, and they had found a route to escape, but it led to a river where they needed a boat. Unless they swam, and by the time they would be able to, the water would be freezing from the season. "My lady, I have not given up hope yet." There was a knock at the door, and Luke stood, separating himself from her as it opened, and Pierce walked in, clearly drunk. He was smiling, and she stood up, the tunic dropping from her hands. The man was worse when his mind wasn't his own. "My lady, come here," he ordered. She walked to him, and he yanked her arm back with force. She let out a soft groan as he took her lips without care, and she couldn't fight him. The stench from the alcohol made her want to vomit, but she held it in, and when he pulled away, his eyes were dazed. "I have a surprise for you." And then he turned to Luke. "And you too." He began dragging her out of the chamber and down the stairs, where there were 4 large gladiators standing in the middle of the room. They were carrying swords and dressed in rich red armor. Francesca's heart sank, and fear entered her body when Pierce laughed and pushed her to sit in a chair. And then he turned around to face Luke and cleared his throat. "Do you like what I have gathered here today, slave?" he asked. "My lord, perhaps you can enlighten me what this is all about." Pierce smiled and turned back to the gladiators. "These are the city's finest warriors. They have never lost a single battle in the field. And tonight, I have brought them here for my entertainment. I want to see how good you are with your sword. Word has it that you are victorious, and I'd like to see it firsthand. Would you grant me that honor?" Francesca let out a fearful gasp. "My lord, he is my slave. He belongs to me." Pierce turned around and slapped her across the face. The hit made her lose her breath, and her cheek felt numb. When she looked up at him again, he grabbed her hair and pulled her to a standing position. "You dare to go against me? You are nothing but a weak woman whose mind is fogged. If I hear your voice again, I shall rip your tongue out and feed it to the dogs." She felt the hot tears on her cheeks as she replied, "Yes, my lord." He shoved her down, and she looked up at Luke, whose face was written with concern and disgust at Pierce. He stepped forward and glared at him. "What is it that you want out of me, my lord? A battle against your gladiators? I will do it." Pierce smiled and took one of the swords from the men. Without warning, he rammed it into Luke's shoulder, and Francesca screamed. A pool of red blood began forming at the base of the sword attached to Luke's shoulder. Laughing, Pierce replied, "You will fight injured, so you don't have the upper hand, and you shall also fight without a weapon." He tossed the sword back to the gladiator, and he grabbed her hand to sit. "Watch them kill your slave," he whispered. And without warning, the gladiators charged at Luke, all 4 together, swords in hands, as he barged toward them. She shut her eyes, and he turned her toward the battle, holding her head in place. "Watch. Watch how he will die a slow and painful death." Francesca sobbed as the gladiators took turns trying to take the life of Luke. But he was much too skilled, and even without a weapon, he was able to take 2 of them down with his bare hands. He picked up the swords from the 2 fallen men and masterfully danced his way through the other 2. When Pierce signaled, one of his men fired an arrow that hit Luke's upper thigh. She screamed out and he slapped her across the face. This made Luke lose concentration, and they were able to penetrate his back. When he fell to one knee, the gladiator tried to end his life, but Luke kicked him from under his feet. And then he grabbed the man by the shoulder as the other one swung. He used his mate as a shield, and the gladiator ended up taking his own friend out. When the arrows came again, Luke threw a punch that caused the final gladiator to go down. He picked up the dead man's body and used it as a shield from the flying arrows, and then he swung and tossed the body toward the archers and dropped to his knees, blood soaking his shirt and face as he stared up slowly at her. Francesca felt her body shake, and in that moment she broke free from Pierce's hold, running to him. The archers above fired an arrow by accident and caught her in the back. When she went down, both Pierce and Luke shouted her name. Pierce turned and swung his sword toward the archer who fired the arrow and struck him in the face. He turned around to find Luke holding an unconscious Francesca. He shoved Luke down and picked her up in his arms. "What kind of husband are you? You strike your own bride?" Luke asked. Pierce turned around to face him. "She's my bride, to see and do as I want to. You are nothing but a slave. Back to the dungeon you will go until the day you die." The darkness of the dungeon was waiting for him as he was tossed to the ground. This time he was not chained, thankfully, but his wounds were not tended, and he developed a fever in the middle of the night. He was shaking. His body was withering with cold and hot spells fighting off the sickness, but all his mind could think of was Francesca, and if she was safe. The moment she ran out to him and the arrow caught her, he wished he had been faster to know her intention. She took an arrow for him, and Pierce hadn't been bothered that she might have died from it. He groaned as he grit his teeth from the pain that was escalating from his wounds. Blood was still seeping from his body, and he felt weak. No food or water were given, and he felt the exhaustion winning over him. How was he going to get out of here now? They had just 2 weeks left, and if he didn't do something soon, she would have to marry that bastard. He began to shake, harder than before, his teeth chattering, and he rolled to his side, holding his hands between his legs. And then he saw the light before him and heard her soft voice calling his name. "Luke, Luke, stay awake, stay with me." He reached for her hands, and as he held onto something soft and warm, he fell into a dark hole. He dreamt of an ocean that swallowed him, and as he fought through the waves to go home, he found his hands tangled with strands, soft hair strands, and through the light came her face, peering at him with a glow that made his heart ache. Why hadn't he just claimed her to begin with? If he had, none of this would have happened. He would be with her, knowing her body and soul as his, and keeping her from harm. He whispered her name and then pulled her toward him to kiss. It felt so real, tasting her. She smelled like fresh daisies. Holding her body in his, palming the curves of her body and inhaling her scent, it made his body come alive. His heart thumped, and sweat came over him like a wash of freedom, allowing him to finally breathe and live for the first time. "Francesca," he whispered as he kissed her neck and pulled her into his arms. "I want you. I need you. Give in to me." She smiled against him and let out a soft moan that fluttered his heart to life. "I'm all yours." When she leaned down to kiss him and he wrapped his arms around her, a wave of water pounded on them, and he jolted awake. He was on the bed in her chamber, and she had her arms wrapped around him. Was that a dream? Was that dream real? His whole body ached, and he felt like he'd been hammered from head to toe. He gently moved, and the bed shifted, causing her to wake. When her eyes opened and she stared at him, he paused to recognize how beautiful she really was. "Milady," he whispered, "are you all right?" She nodded and then blushed. "I'm fine. Are you all right?" He paused a moment and then he removed his hands from around her. "What happened?" She blushed again and turned away from him. Nothing. Luke felt odd as she moved from the bed, and that was when he caught sight of the virginal blood on the bedsheets. So it hadn't been a dream. He had been kissing her. He shot up in bed and ran around to stop her. The moment he looked into her eyes and saw her cheeks flaring up in red, he knew it was true. He almost laughed, and then he pulled her into his arms. "I apologize, my lady. I thought it was a dream." She put her hands on his back. "You were in and out of consciousness. You had a fever, and so I got into bed with you. And somewhere between me getting into bed with you and the morning hours, She stopped and pulled away. Her face flushed. "If Lord Paris finds out, I would be executed." "Where is he?" "Away," she said. "That is how I was able to get you out of the dungeon. The king decreed him to go await the queen's envoy and to bring her home. This is our time to escape, my lord. We have no other time." Luke nodded and then looked at her bandaged shoulder. "Your wound. Did I hurt you?" "Like I told you before, I'm not made of glass." "I apologize, my lady. I was not entirely together when I took you as mine. Was I rough on you?" She blushed and lowered her head. "You were quite in need of a female companion, I'll say." Then she looked up. "But it satisfied me." Smiling, Luke pulled her into his arms. "You were always mine, my lady." As they stayed wrapped in each other's arms, the sound of the drums from outside made the two of them let each other go, and fear settled into her eyes. "He's returned! He wasn't supposed to return until the morrow. Why is he back?" Right at that moment, Francesca rushed to the door and found that it was locked from the outside. A fearful sound escaped from her lips, and when Luke came to kick the door open, there, walking up the steps, was Pierce and his men-at-arms. She came to hold him as they were encircled, and he shielded her. "I knew it," Pierce said as he gave them a wicked smile. "I knew nothing couldn't be saved from this. How could a man of Ty really honor his words? You know what I found out? I found out that she was your bride before she was sent to me. How could your father send me someone else's leftovers?" Francesca tightened her hands into fists. "Let us go. You know now, so just let us go." Laughing, Pierce replied, "Let you go? Oh no, darling, that will never happen. See, I don't just let people go. Before I can do that, I must take the very life they breathe and make them squeal like a dying pig." The men-at-arms threw a rope over Luke and kicked him to his knees. She screamed as Pierce grabbed her by the neck and squeezed. "Let her go. The person you want is me," Luke cried. Pierce laughed as he pushed a thumb into the injury on her shoulder. Screaming, Luke asked for him to stop, but he grabbed a handful of her hair and forced her down on her knees. What an idiot I was to think I was so lucky to have such a pure bride. Tell me, did he already take what was supposed to be mine? Huh? Did he make you squeal in delight as he rammed himself into you? Did he? Yes, she cried. He took what was rightfully his. Pierce slapped her across the face as she fell over coughing. You ungrateful whore. Let her go. You want blood? Why don't you come and take mine? Luke cried. Pierce smiled. No, that won't hurt you. But this will hurt you. And he picked her up and brought her to the bedroom. Luke cried out as the men kicked him down and Pierce threw her on the bed. She bit into his arm and he smacked her hard enough where she broke a tooth. Don't. Just stop this. Let her go, Luke cried. If you are a real man, why don't you come and fight me? Pierce ran his hands over her body and shoved her dress up. But that won't hurt you. This is what will hurt you where my sword cannot reach. Francesca took that moment to ram her knee between his legs, and he groaned as he fell over. Luke swung his legs and caught the men-at-arms off guard as he ripped himself free from the rope. He opened his arms and she ran into them. He grabbed the rope and tied it into the body of Pierce and took a rope into the other side of his hand. Do you trust me? He whispered. I trust you, she replied. Luke took a hold of her into one of his arms, and they jumped out the window together. Pierce screamed as his body was dragged across the floor. The men-at-arms tried to stop him as both Luke and Francesca made it to the grounds down below. "Kill them! Kill them now!" Pierce cried. The men-at-arms began firing arrows down at them, and Pierce stood up, yanking one of the bows from his men. "Outrun this!" He fired, and he watched as the arrow caught her through the neck, and she fell into Luke's arms. The sound of the city streets jolted Luke awake as he rolled in his bed. He turned to the red number staring at him from the night table. It was 4 a.m, and again the dream haunted him as he slept. This time he'd seen her so well, kissed her, even inhaled her very scent. His hands remembered the softness of her hair and felt the rhythm of her heartbeat. It had been since he could remember that he'd had this dream. Always ended up with her dying in his arms, and he would wake up feeling exhausted, trying to feel better about a longing he didn't understand. Luke sat up and massaged his head, feeling a headache come on as he let out a deep breath. Today, he was signing a new contract that would allow him to take control of his stepfather's company. The company he'd stolen from his mother. He had fought tooth and nail for this, and yet in the end, he didn't feel proud. He wanted to hurt the man for hurting his mother, for lying and leaving her to die so young. He was going to strike where the man didn't expect and make him pay once and for all. But first, a shower and some strong coffee. Dressed in a sleek black 3-piece suit, Luke walked into the boardroom meeting, and immediately his longtime friend and partner stood up and gave him a smile. Hudson Lai was a tall, handsome, and dark type, but he had the heart of a king. He was a good man, always with Luke, and never bothered by the many things he did. Together, they had been through a lot, including Hudson's divorce and Luke's mental breakdown in college years. "You sure know how to dress for a winning moment," Hudson said as he slapped him on the shoulder. "You ready to take the company from the old man?" Luke laughed and pulled out a chair to sit down. "Frickin' hell, Hudson, I've been ready the day he put my mother in the ground. He will pay for all he did to her." He picked up the pen as his secretary walked in with some papers. As soon as she left, he opened the folder and looked at the sheets. "You all right, man?" Hudson asked. "You look a little tired." Luke cleared his throat and nodded. "Don't I look grand?" Laughing, Hudson replied, "No, you look grand, all right, but you got a little circle underneath your eyes. I mean, are you sleeping okay?" Looking up, Luke replied, "If I'm not, I will be soon enough." The door opened and in walked Warren Chan, the man who had ruined his mother's life. Warren had that handsome and an old age type look, which he understood why his mother had been swept away. But he was a lethal machine beneath his handsome looks, and he didn't care who he murdered in the way to get what he wanted. "Your mother would be so embarrassed of you," Warren said as he came in. "Look at the son she raised, breaking hell all over town, stealing people's hard work." Luke stood and closed the folder on the table. "Be very glad I didn't have you arrested for murder, Warren. You don't get to screw around with people's lives and walk away clean. My mother died because of what you did to her. Today I'm going to take it back and bury you alive." Laughing, Warren replied, "You? And what army?" And then he pointed to Hudson. "Him? He's a weak bastard who runs where you point." "Hey!" Hudson cried. "At least I got a master who's kind to me, unlike you who no one wants to tutor." Luke smiled and put his hand on Hudson's arm, gently pushing him away. He walked to where Warren stood and watched as the man's eyes darkened with hate. "My mother raised me to be a gentleman, and I will hold that end of the bargain until the day I draw my last breath. But do you remember what you did to her? On her deathbed, she was ill and unable to communicate properly, so you forged her signature to give everything she owned over to you. You burned all the evidence, and you think you are still ahead of me, don't you?" Warren smiled and put his hands in his pockets. "Your mother gave me everything. She would never leave anything to a little maggot like you. She hated you to the core." Luke smirked and shrugged. "I'll give you 2 options today. 1. You sign everything back to me stating that you used my mother's illness to force her to sign her life away. I'll make sure I let you keep that shitty shack you live in. And what else? If you refuse, I'll opt for option 2. And you'll find out soon enough about that. Warren laughed and replied, Boy, am I scared. Didn't even think for a moment that you'll win this, Luke Tai. Your mother gave birth to a born loser and you will die a loser. You have nothing against me and I will keep ownership of this company. You better make sure you have a good lawyer or else I will rip you clean of whatever you own. Luke smiled. Oh, I had hoped for nothing less. He turned around and said, Hudson, go ahead and play it. Gladly. While they had been talking, Hudson had set up a computer and projector. He hit the play button, and Luke's mother came on the screen, sitting in a hospital bed, her face swollen with pain and pale with sickness. Warren's eyes opened wide, and he nearly stumbled backward. This is a testimony for me, Lisa Tai. My son, Luke Tai, is the sole ownership of Tai Properties and holds all shares. Warren Chan is a cheating bastard who has come slithering in to lie and scheme his way to make sure my son gets nothing. The day I die is the day Warren Chan murdered me. If you are watching this, it means I am no longer here. He has me buried without officially letting my son know, and the authorities can be contacted to find my body. She broke down and began crying. This video will be sent to my son exactly 10 days after my death. Tai, I love you. I will never forgive Warren Chan for what he did, and I hope you never do too. The video went black, and Warren stumbled backward as Luke cleared his throat and crossed his arms. You thought you could get away with burying my mother without my knowledge? I found her body, Warren, and had her cremated. I have her ashes with me, and all the rest of the things that belong to me. Now, either you sign those papers, or this video goes to the police, and you can kiss your dirty life goodbye. Warren walked to him, and his hands curled into fists. Your mother should never have given birth to you. You are a devil spawned out of hell. Smiling, Luke replied, and you should know, right? You were kicked out of hell itself because even the devil has a heart and you do not. A man like you who takes advantage of a sickly woman is lower than scum. He pulled a pen out from his jacket and handed it to him. Sign. I gotta hand it to you, buddy. You did it. I didn't think you could ever find a way to get him to sign over the company to you. They were sitting together at the cafe around the corner, paper signed and dotted. He was now back in control of his mother's company, and he let out a breath of relief. His mother was still watching him from above. He felt a sudden pain of emotion hit him, and tears pricked his eyes. I'll be right back, he said, as he stood and headed toward the bathroom. On his way, he noticed a beautiful curvy woman standing before him, thanking the cash attendant for her order. As she turned around, the door opened and he saw a homeless man run inside, his hands reaching out to grab the order in her hands. As he yanked it out of her, she slipped and the hair that was piled on top of her head coiled down. Her scream echoed through the cafe and Luke reached for her. He caught her just as the homeless man ran outside with her food, and when she looked up at him, his heart stopped beating for a split second. The woman who he was staring at him was the very same woman he'd been dreaming about since he could remember. Here she was, in the flesh, in his arms, where he felt her curves, and her presence burned him something deep inside. He stared at her beautiful face, suddenly weak as he held her, and her hands came up to push herself away. Thank you, she said. Are you all right? He asked. Nodding, she smiled weakly. Yes, I'm fine. And then he gazed down at her left hand and saw the sparkling engagement ring. His heart tore as she turned from him, and the employee from behind the desk came out with a replacement of her food. She thanked them, and she turned to smile at him once more before she disappeared out the door. He watched as she climbed into the back of a very expensive SUV, and the driver, who was dressed in a black suit, drove the car out of the parking lot. He let out a breath, and an agony hit his heart so deep that he almost lost his will to stand. When he found he could breathe again, he stormed out of the store and began chasing the SUV into traffic. Cars honked at him, and he slipped into a puddle of water, slamming his knee into the ground, where he tore his pant leg and flesh. "Luke!" Hudson cried as he zigzagged his way to him. "Luke, what the hell are you doing, man?" With a shaking voice, Luke whispered, "It was her." "Her who?" "Her," Luke said with disbelief. "I just saw her. The woman from my dreams." The teapot was whistling, a shrieking voice in the house as Luke stared at the walls, unbelieving what had just happened. He was sitting in a t-shirt and shorts, hair still wet from his shower, as Hudson poured them each a cup of tea. He ran a hand through his hair and let out a deep breath. "Luke, pull yourself together, man." Hudson handed him a cup and sat down beside him. "You scared the living shit out of me." Luke set the cup down and shut his eyes. "I'm sure of it, Hudson. Like it was a moment, a flash, but I know what I saw. She was in my arms. I could hold her, and I stared right into her eyes. I saw her looking right at me the way she did when I dreamt about her. It's surreal, I know, but you have to believe me, Hudson. She has always haunted my dreams, and I wake up feeling entirely exhausted. I've been searching for her ever since. I know that she and I have something together. I can feel it. And when I touched her just now, just then, I felt my whole body come alive like never before. It reminded me why I'm alive." Hudson laughed and leaned back in the sofa. "Look, dude, I know you've been through a lot, but this is sounding like college again. You know what hell you put your mother through then?" He shook his head as he replied, "This is nothing like college. That was me having a mental breakdown. This is me telling you that I've always been tied to this woman. From a past life or something, it seems. We've always been together in some way, and I have loved her fiercely. I know because I wake up feeling whole and complete. And for so long, my heart has been aching to find her, and today I did. It just made me feel so alive, like I was breathing for the first time." "And did she recognize you?" Shaking his head, he whispered, "No. The look she gave me was as if she saw nothing but a stranger being kind." "And there you go," Hudson said as he slapped his thigh. "That is your answer to everything. It's telling you that your mind is going crazy. Luke, look, man, you just got the company you've been fighting all your life for. We need to focus on that, and only then can we get more clients, and you're doing so well. Don't let this little hiccup bring you down." Luke shook his head. "It's not a damn hiccup, Hudson. You don't understand. Having her in my life means I will be able to do anything, even the hardest thing possible, because she's the one, my entire soul and life partner. She is it. I have to find her." Thank you for tuning in. Chapter 3 will be out shortly.
I remember when we woke up, how your body looked like porcelain in the light. No complaining, we were alright. But then again, I thought we were one of a kind. Oh, na na, oh, you're good with lies. Oh, na na, wish I wasn't right. Now every morning when I wake up, you're laying so close, I gotta push you to your side. I go to work while you still sleep, I don't wanna argue cause it's never worth a fight. Oh, na na, oh, you're good with lies. Oh, na na, wish I wasn't right. Whoa, 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 what a lovely mess you made. Nothing's gonna make me stay. What a lovely mess you made. Nothing's gonna make me stay. When we began here, it was simple. Now all we do is turn nothing into rain. And I've been acting all insane. I feel you bringing out the worst inside of me. Oh, na na, oh, you're good with lies. Oh, na na, wish I wasn't right. Whoa, whoa, what a lovely mess you made. Nothing's gonna make me stay. What a lovely mess you made. Nothing's gonna make me stay. I saw